Ladies and gentlemen, everyone around and in between, it is Debate Sensei. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving break. It was busy, chaotic, hectic for me. We got Tim Seavey from San Diego here with us. Hello, hello.
That's me. But more importantly, you're fuzzy.
Am I?
Not your picture, your head.
Oh, yes. Uh, yes. So I participated in the St. Baldrick's Shave-a-thon at my school. In fact, hosted it. So we raised over $4,000 for children cancer research. Eh, yeah,
Nice.
so it was good. And so part of it is me shaving my head in solidarity with children going through chemotherapy and radiation.
Right on.
Yeah,
Well, you look great.
yeah. Thank you.
I was gonna say like an old Brad Pitt from. You were saying Fight Club. I say 12 Monkeys. It's a little bit.
Yeah. All right. So today we are talking about international topics. And just to recap, we've decided to organize the international topics based on tectonic plates. And we're just going alphabetically. So we did the Africa plate, we did the Arabian plate, and now we're doing Australian, right?
Yeah.
This is the third one. All right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think we decided to skip over the Antarctic plate because I don't think even we can fill that for 30 minutes.
Yeah. Maybe next season we'll do a little spoof
Special
episode
bonus
of that.
South Pole episode.
Yeah. Just the Antarctic. There are a few things, but yeah, you'd have to go. Might be more of a deep dive than sort of. We're treating this like a broad survey of things that you could potentially talk about
Yeah.
in a debate. All right. So there's a little bit of a different way that I wanted to start here, though, because the Australian plate, by and large, is kind of under the Pacific Ocean. So there's not a whole lot of countries compared to things like Africa or Eurasia or things like that. And so
Yeah.
when I was doing research on this, I had got this Wikipedia article about the Australia Asia debating format. They have their own debate format.
Specifically between Asia and Australia? Okay.
Well, I think it's more like this is the type of debate that happens in Australia and Asia.
Okay.
So it's not between them, but it's like, but a lot of people just call it the Australasian debating or
Hmm.
Australius style.
All right.
And it's two teams of three.
Whoa. Okay.
So yeah, they'll have the first affirmative, second affirmative, and third affirmative, and they'll have the negative for each one as well. But then they have one reply speech that has to be given by either the first or second speaker. So that operates as like a rebuttal, I guess.
Interesting. Okay. I saw
So
3 and 3 done one time, and it was okay. Uh, it was like really well thought out, except for one important piece, and that was that they encouraged, not allowed, but encouraged heckling,
oh
like as part of the debate format. And the worst part of it is it was for middle school,
oh
and I like some of these kids were really good at it, and that was just like not heckling from the audience. It was from the other team. So the other
oh
team would be encouraged to like while the person's speaking, throw in things like biased source and just keep going. Like just throwing that
oh
out there, which I'm like, how is this helpful in teaching them to be good communicators? Like these kids are literally just getting a role, but then you have this really confident team on the other side that like sees them starting to get on a roll and just completely derails it with these, little jabs. So I think that was the one piece that I couldn't quite get over was the heckle component of the 3-on-3 debate that I've seen. It's like as soon
okay,
as you get a large group debating against each other, I think the quality starts to erode sometimes.
right. But
But,
I thought that was
okay, so
interesting.
that's interesting avenue of how the world of debate functions. Uh, anything in the news? I got a couple things in the news around the Australian plate of what they're doing down
Yeah,
under.
let's start with the big one. Let's start with the big country, Australia
Yeah.
itself.
So vaping, they just passed a pretty
Oh,
landmark um, policy that they are going to more or less completely like do everything they can to remove vaping. So all single-use disposable vapes will be eliminated or be banned by like April of 2024. Um,
Mm.
and it's like a pretty big study found that young people in Australia, it's like 1 in 5 are considered like active vapors. So like that's a real problem that they're trying to crack down on. And rather than going after the end users and just like banning it, they're trying their best to squeeze it at the distribution manufacturer level. So they're saying like
Okay.
there's a big push from big tobacco to make these so insanely available and cheap and really addictive. And so they're trying to cut down all like distribution, manufacture, transport, etc., rather than make it like on the individual level, like you just can't
Oh,
get
wow.
these. So it's an interesting way to go about it. It would be kind of like if the U.S. just cut down like the transportation of cigarettes, like doesn't shut down, like the tobacco farms, and doesn't shut down the
Right.
corner store, but just bans how it's moved, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and like so if people are so remember, like when we're talking about this, it isn't like you're expecting the resolution to be was Australia's ban on
Yeah,
vaping justified? It can be more along the lines of the United States should ban vaping, and now Australia can become sort of a case study that you could use as far as your evidence goes,
sure.
right?
Yeah,
Like
that's
so
a good one.
just anybody who's watching, I just want to make sure that you know that where we're going with this. It's not like we are expecting the topic itself to have like the word Australia in it or some Australian plate country in it. Is that this information could be useful in any number of debates, and so like vaping in general could be a debate topic, specifically like compared to traditional tobacco forms.
Yeah.
um, the whole debate about whether or not this is a step in the right direction or if it just kind of like entrenches people into you know a habitual behavior that we don't want.
Yeah, I think those are always helpful when looking at any of these international kind of broad, so not deep dives, but like kind of broad surveys. I find it one, it's kind of helpful for extemp for any of you out there that are doing the IE side of this, but doing extemporaneous speaking.
Right.
But it's
Yeah.
also helpful for coming up with plan texts. It
Right.
was always helpful when talking about like just very like broader like drug criminalization or
Right.
decriminalization to look at like, oh well, here's how the Netherlands does it, or here's how Denmark does it or whatever. So
Or
looking to other
Portugal. Yeah.
countries' policies is helpful. So I think because just few countries have made such broad or such like big strides towards
Hmm.
banning vaping, like I think that's a useful model. We'll be able to see just how that goes down.
Okay, so I got a couple other things as far as Australia goes. There was just recently a very contentious um, referendum about whether or not to constitutionally recognize Indigenous people, specifically having a committee that would advise Parliament on matters that affect Australia's Aboriginal population. And I'm ignorant about what the Torres Strait Island people. Um,
Mm.
so that's completely new to me. I think that's a region that being an American and not looking into it, I completely say that I am ignorant about that, but it seemed to be part of the referendum,
Mm.
um, and it got defeated. So I think that might be that. I still think that that's an area of discussion. It's like whether or not that was right is one thing that you can have a debate about, but also the implications that it has for Indigenous people in
Yeah.
other colonized countries.
Yeah. And I think once in a while, it doesn't happen as often, but it used to be the case. You get lots of resolutions with this house
Yeah.
as your actors. Like this house believes that there should be an expansion of Indigenous rights or something like that.
Right.
And when you get that kind of broad, when it's not an explicit actor that is laid out for you, you've got the capability of going for like, we're going to pick the Indigenous peoples in Australia. And that's what the debate is about. So like sometimes those are fun. Just the more that on a, maybe off the beaten path for an American, debater, be, worthwhile talking about just what's going on elsewhere.
Mhm.
One other thing that I found as far as relevance for Australia is they're like really falling short of their green energy
Mm.
goals. So they've committed to a lot of various renewable energy source, and they're just falling short of it. And so you can start figuring out like, okay, why is it that's not happening? I think it's oftentimes helpful like start drawing parallels like what works really well in France is not working well in Australia. Why is that? Is it just like a climate thing? Is it an economy thing? Is it just like a cultural adoption thing? Like, why is some of these things working or not working? And I think those are useful in responses when talking about environmental plans for the US, where people are like, well, that works in France. Like, they have all kinds of nuclear, but that would never fly here. You can similarly look at, okay, well, your counter plan is a bunch of wind. And even in a place that has like way fewer mountains or whatever, like Australia, they're still having problems with it for this, and this reason. So it's just useful to know like where other challenges are happening with a somewhat similar, population and economy to the U.S. Or it's not like huge, but they've got, well-developed sectors and a somewhat similar population.
Last thing I got on Australia actually involves another Australian plate country, which is Papua New Guinea. There's a security treaty that Australia and Papua New Guinea are entering into or trying to, and it's being delayed because they have concern. Papua New Guinea has concerns about sovereignty, specifically like this is kind of related to some sort of U.S. security treaty, and U.S. military wants to use ports in Papua New Guinea, and I think that is important when it comes to debates like about China. Because that entire area that in the Pacific Ocean is becoming really, really contentious. Like China is literally building islands in the middle of the South China Sea, and they're claiming more and more land. And so what that does is really affect like trade routes. And I think that like more of a U.S. military presence somewhere that, like they're trying to establish their military presence anywhere they can, including Papua New Guinea. And so I think that's, any sort of China discussion that you're having those details could be really helpful in any story that you're trying to tell an audience, it's like, hey, they're trying to get a new military base there. It could be the brink of a disadvantage. It could, you could add a bit of uniqueness to a disadvantage if you wanted to with information like that, but somewhat interesting.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Other countries that are on the Australian plate that you found that are also experiencing some interesting happenings?
Yeah, but most of them, like if I was going to say like an overall theme I saw was like earthquakes and volcanoes.
Oh,
yeah.
And it's just an inhospitable place.
Yeah, like there is at least three different earthquakes that happened around there in the last like week or two. Like, level 5 or above. And so just all that. And so when we're talking tectonic plates, this seems to be one of the more active areas in the world as far as tectonic activity, you know what I mean? And so, I think Papua New Guinea was, evacuating because of recent volcano eruptions, and they're keeping an eye out for tsunamis because of recent earthquakes, and luckily that hasn't materialized into giant waves. But I'm not sure I don't know. I just wanted to point out a theme that I saw.
Yeah.
And then you start trying to apply it to like debate strategies or just predicting debate topics. I don't know if it really does that.
So disaster response, one of the things that I saw is about mangroves. So like the protection of mangrove trees. And there's it was like research into mangrove trees for all of their many purposes, but they've been used by Indigenous folks in Australia for, millennia or thousands of years. And they are now coming to realize all these various uses that kind of more modern Australian medicine has never considered. But mangrove forests also are really, really critical in mitigating the severity of natural disasters. And I think that's a thing that's become more in the know lately when like mangrove forests in like Florida were cut down. Some of the only places where there are mangroves in the United States. And it was like clear cut to try and create like seawalls and barriers and things that are complete garbage against heavy waves, where mangroves actually are the kind of the natural perfect defense, just because it forces waves to break up a whole bunch. So it dissipates a lot of their energy without completely stopping and being like a dead force against the weight, the way that like a cement seawall just takes all of it and then just gets battered into nothing eventually. So that was a useful, super specific, but an interesting alternative. So like I think a fun plan might be plant a bunch of mangrove forests along the coast. One, because like here's all these really cool medicinal uses, but also for natural disaster preparedness and natural disaster relief, like that is a very cheap, eco-friendly, sustainable, a renewable way to protect coastline from natural disasters. So cultivating, like protecting mangroves, but also planting new mangroves as a way to, help mitigate natural disaster impact. Where you got, waves and tsunami and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like those mangroves are fascinating, or how they convert salt water into usable water. Like one of the few plants I know of that does that. I'm like, we should study that a lot more.
Yeah, they're kind of the coolest plants. Yeah, they do amazing things. Oh, we would be super remiss if we didn't talk about the Great Barrier Reef. So
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we actually, many moons ago, you and I had a debate talking about nuclear energy, and I brought up as like my base example, like how the Great Barrier Reef has been declared dead because like more than 50% of it is dead, is no longer growing. And so that's to say like 40-ish%, I think is more modern number, like is still alive. But as the water temperatures increase, and I think it's salinity, so like the volume of salt in the area also increases. I think those are like two of the factors that contribute to coral bleaching. Also, people using traditional sunscreen. So never knew about this, but it's like a couple of the chemicals that exist in sunscreen are what just attaches to and kills coral. So because coral is not just like a rock structure, it's like the product, it's kind of like a shell. It's like the product of a living creature that is inside the coral. And so when that gets, comes in contact with certain chemicals, it just bleaches and dies. And because the creatures inside have also died. So zinc-based sunscreen is like the only sunscreen you can use in places where there is coral, or just, don't use sunscreen and like deal with burning because it's part of life.
Well, I think that there's mineral alternatives to it, right?
Yeah.
That there's
the zinc-based stuff. So it's super thick. It's like you can't rub it in all the way because it's too thick. But I think that's it. It's like whatever, amazing chemistry, like come up with it Dow to be able to like rub in this really thick white stuff, but also make it see-through is what, some of that chemical in there, I'm not sure what it is, ends up killing reefs. So like public awareness campaigns and things around that of like, don't wear regular sunscreen to any ocean where there's reef. So like, don't do it at any ocean, but particularly where places where there's reefs. So I don't know if there's a lot of debate topic necessarily in there, but I'm sure that like you can research a lot more about the Great Barrier Reef and like just what's being done, because it's this weird thing where they want to protect it partly because it's such a tourist draw. So they want to like bring tourists to it to bring awareness to it. Yet at the same time, it's kind of the tourists that are the problem. So like they're trying to be really, protective in the way that like I'm sure the PR team at SeaWorld is like, no, we're teaching kids about fish and we're like informing them about conservation. But at the same time, you're still SeaWorld, like you're still running boats that use motor oil and other, crap to get tourists out to this reef. So I think that becomes like an interesting catch-22 where it's like awareness about something versus actually protecting the thing. So I think that there's, potentially some debate ground in there of like conversations about conservation, like awareness conservation is not conservation.
Or just, regulating sunscreen more. You know what I mean? It's like,
sure,
it could be, something that
I do love a boring plan. Like I think that boring plans really like should be used way more often in debate. I think way too regularly. It's like boots on the ground military invasion, or like ban 100% of something, or like completely convert to another thing. And I like big, bold, audacious plans as well. But I think that like a well thought out, but like specific, non-sexy plan that just does a good job of helping solve for one really important harm is a better debate that like is an informative experience for everyone in the room, instead of just like, no, we cause extinction. No, you cause extinction. No, we cause extinction. I'm kind of sick of listening to that shit every single round.
Okay. So let's try to tackle another one. I came across Indonesia, and one of the interesting things I saw about Indonesia was that they do have a presidential election that's happening right now. There could be, like sort of topics that revolve around what is dividing them. But what I saw was how Indonesia is this place where a lot of protests are happening, like global protests. So one of them is that Indonesia is pulling out of the World Beach Games. So these are like volleyball and stuff like that. And specifically, they are pulling out because of the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Okay.
Yeah. So Indonesia is very pro-Palestine.
Okay.
So they are protesting Israel's bombing of Gaza by doing this. And so you could this could just be a debate about Israel Palestine, which is always an issue, but it also could be about the efficacy of protests like this.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the interesting debates that I think is not even what side are you on, but is it better to engage or disengage from world sporting competitions for stuff like this? Like, what sends the better message? What is more effective? What, because I'm thinking if you go, you can have a platform where you have little badges or stickers or little things, Palestinian flags. Is that better, or is just pulling out altogether the better thing to do?
Yeah, I think that's a topic that comes up in the tipping point. So what's that? God, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. But he's the guy. He's written Malcolm Gladwell. So he's talking about why certain ideas really catch on. And he made this comment. There was a guy that was kind of like a streaker, but instead he had a T-shirt of some brand that he was, I'm sure, paid to promote. But wore a tutu and jumped off the high dive at the Olympics one year. But it was because he's going to get all this visibility for this company that's on his T-shirt. Nobody remembers the T-shirt. They just remember the idiot that jumped off the high dive in a tutu. And so it's about sometimes just having, here's your big statement, but here's why here's what drove the statement. Those two things, if they don't align well, you don't really have the impact. So we're boycotting these games so that so as to stop Israel from bombing Palestine. If that message isn't abundantly clear and available and everyone knows that, they'll only know, oh, well, so-and-so didn't show up that year. So ensuring that the two ideas stick together. I mean, similarly, if they just wore a ribbon on their collar or something like that, that people don't quite know the message behind that. I think it's an important one to try and be able to use that platform to its most effective manner, kind of as you say, and that can be tough. Do you know if other countries bailed out of that as well? Or boycotted?
I don't know. Indonesia was hosting it though.
Oh,
yeah. So
did they say no, we're not hosting it anymore? They pulled out of that?
I think so.
Whoa.
Yeah.
All right.
Or is it just the country? I don't know. No, it's just been canceled. The World Beach Games 2023 have been canceled after host Indonesia suddenly withdrew from the tournament.
Wow. That's intense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the weird coincidence is that the British band the 1975, they had a world tour that was supposed to go through Indonesia, but apparently the front man and a bandmate had a same-sex kiss on stage in Malaysia, and that caused a whole bunch of controversy because Malaysia and Indonesia are majority Muslim countries, and so 1975 is canceling its shows in Jakarta and Taipei and I think one other place.
Wow.
Because of that. So I thought, I'm oh wow, there's these two different sort of global protests happening, one by Indonesia and one against Indonesia. It's wow, that's
that is, yeah. Wouldn't have expected to find them at the middle of it, but yeah, that's neat pieces. One of the leaders on our team, on our speech and debate team, has a hat that says "Make the 1975 political again." Just found that man, you got a really deep, specific cut reference. I appreciate that on a hat.
Yeah.
So I know the plate is also connected to India, and so I think Sri Lanka falls onto the Indian plate.
Really? Is it? Okay. I did not have that on the plate.
Nope. I'm sorry. Nope. It falls just short of it. And it's actually, it looks like it's not even all of Indonesia. It's just a small piece of Indonesia.
Yeah.
Still technically counts.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going on in New Zealand.
New Zealand. what did I say? Oh, it looks like so it looks like you're going to scrap a smoking ban, which is a little bit
Opposite to
ironic.
what their
Yeah, somewhat
Aussie brothers are
opposite.
doing.
Looks like they were trying to ban smoking, not vaping, but smoking. I'm seeing
Yeah.
a bunch of cigarette pictures and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
for whatever reason, it looks like they're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like that seems to be the primary news, at least that we're getting. As I tell my extempers, it's always better to get the most local source that you can.
Yeah.
So looks like the Scoop. Yeah, that's still actually pretty big, even within their like some local sources that I'm seeing. There's some kind of very specific like local politics stuff that's going on. But I'm not seeing that there's like a huge amount happening all at once.
No, like I've seen something about China and New Zealand having a contention over something called AUKUS, and I don't know what the hell that is. There's I guess an international organization called AUKUS, AUKUS. So like New Zealand is trying to walk this tightrope about calling out China on human rights abuses, but at the same time trying to maintain, effective relationship with them.
So AUKUS is a trilateral security partnership for the Indo-Pacific region of Australia, the UK, and the US. So AU, UK,
Oh,
US,
oh,
AUKUS.
okay.
Got it.
Got it.
Okay. So there's your link story. Getting into like South China Sea tensions roiling, U.S. wanting more ports in the area, but also like beefing up military partnerships and trades. So AUKUS is kind of another region you could start to pick at as like, yeah, this is just an extension of Western creep or regional partnership between a couple of different superpowers trying to have a foothold in the area. So yeah, you've got some interesting link stories you can go through there.
Yeah. So like it seems to, and if you know a lot about the area, you could really just get ahead on that end of the debate. You're like, dude, I'm gonna go South China Sea hardcore. You know what I mean? It's like, and
you can
so
use AUKUS as your actor, right? So that you can. It's not just. I think that maybe is a way that you can just twist your way out of some like critique ground of just like, oh, well, it's just Western influence or whatever. Like, no. This is coming from Australia as well. Like you're using a local actor as well. If there's something that's relevant on that same subject, like threats to Australian security. So yeah, I think that could be some interesting direction to go. Also, like when you're talking about whenever large groups start gathering together, when NATO being an easy example, but the more like large superpower partnerships that there are, the more that ends sometimes to feel like a buildup like World War I, where it's like partnerships to partnerships to partnerships created the powder keg to where like now like any little conflict between two small places becomes a global conflict because of the number of alliances of superpowers.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. Let's make a hard shift. How about East Timor? Timor-Leste? Yeah.
Not particularly versed. I just happened to miss my Timor-Leste newspaper this morning.
Well, so one of their diplomats just got expelled from Myanmar. And Myanmar just had this military coup. So Myanmar has the military installed government. East Timor is siding with the opposition. So now this looks like the next level of escalation between the two nations. And just so everybody knows, East Timor is like the youngest country on the Australian plate. When I was debating forever ago, there was all the sort of violence that was happening. I'm sure that there still is violence, but it was much even hotter than it is now, and making a lot of headlines and stuff like that. And so I don't know, like anytime that there's conflict, you always have an opportunity to either spin a story about international relations going south, or just these scenarios that could escalate or seem to be escalating, that if there's any sort of issues smoldering just beneath the surface, then all you need is a little bit of kindling to ignite something into a hot war of some sort.
Yeah. Looks like my internet connection is getting pretty fuzzy, so I'm not cutting out here. But I think that's also about our time for the Australian plate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think so. So we'll be back with more Debate Sensei episodes, but some of them are going to be these international ones. We'll be tackling the tectonic plates in alphabetical order. So thank you all for watching. It is Tim Seavey, Jared Kubicka-Miller. We're Debate Sensei. We will see you again. All right. Where's my outro? Here we go.